cities. So there are important things for us to learn.
Director Kennedy has since coined a name for such places.
What I call hidden cities. I use the term because these were very big places. There were more people, we now know, in Cahokia, across from St. Louis, than there were in London or Rome.
Walls, buildings, roads, burial sites.
Artifacts of iron were found, artifacts of hardened copper, stone tablets with writing. Regular farmers just plowing their fields would really turn up literally bushel baskets of arrowheads, spear points, etc. And these things were commonplace. Written language. These people possibly did smelt iron, they did smelt copper, and they mined it. They carried a trade over great distances. These were signs of a higher civilization. And that higher civilization idea or theory coming from our educated scientific community of the day.
Roger Williams, founder of the First Baptist Church in America, in the mid-1600s, believed that indigenous people were not only fellow seekers, but that, quote, the Indians were probably of Jewish descent of the lost tribes of Israel. Their artifacts would turn up that suggested the presence of Middle Eastern cultures in North America.
Protestant priests, Catholic fathers, Jewish rabbis were seeing these possible links between the Native Americans and ancient Israel. These links included written records that had possible tie-ins to the ancient world.
There were certainly religious beliefs, thinking that the Native Americans may have been descendants of some Hebraic, Jewish, Israelite travelers to the Americas at different times, or of other Old World peoples at different times. And they're reading the mounds and for introducing various cultural aspects into the Americas.
The idea that ancient inhabitants knew of and used Middle Eastern Hebrew symbols undermined the notion that Native Americans were isolated savages. It also conflicted with the emerging science of the day. Yet many still believed that Native Americans had no written language.
In fact, on the Department of Natural Resources website, you can see that it says, we have no idea who these mysterious people were who were creating these images. And yet, very clearly, our people, who are the traditional people of that area, we know exactly what those teachings are.
In fact,
What happened to these written records?
But it is another irony that we find that we're said to not have any kind of written language or history, and it's all stored in the shelves of the museums.
Every museum, small or big, has a great quantity of stuff that's boxed up that hasn't seen the light of day for literally 100 years.
And we've had the American Indian Religious Freedom Act in this country. You know, in 1978, supposedly we can practice our religion freely. However, our religion is intimately tied with the knowledge that's written on those scrolls, many of which are held in museums that we don't even have. Again, there's this irony of saying no written language, no sophistication, etc., but yet there sure is something that museums want to hold on to.
And many had little doubt that the mound builders were descended from one of the ancient civilizations of Europe or the Middle East, most likely the seafaring Phoenicians of Hebrew or Mediterranean origin. It is, Dr. Stephen Peet may have thought so, and actually charged wanton destruction of the mounds. Whether intentional or not, whether motivated by religious or political agendas or not, modern experts agree that wanton destruction did occur, yet remain, such as these once city walls intentionally preserved as mounds in a golf course in Newark, Ohio.
I'm standing here at the parallel walls that connect the gigantic octagon with a large circle. The circle is 1,054 feet in diameter. The octagon encloses 50 acres, which is large enough to encompass 4 Roman Colosseums. This was built by the ancient Hopewell culture that lived in this region between about 100 BC and AD 400.
The level of precision it is incredible.
The entire Newark earthworks encompasses 4.5 square miles, and it was the largest complex of geometric earthworks ever built in the world. It includes 2 circles, a gigantic octagon, a square. Actually, what we call the Hopewell culture, things like it at least, and things related to it, covered much of eastern North America in different parts. As far south as Florida, as far west as Kansas City, as far east as perhaps New York.
They had to be incredibly sophisticated to be able to build these mounds perfectly, in unison to an octagon shape and a circular shape.
It's clear that they rival, by any scale, any other cultural achievement in the world. The Great Pyramids, the Great Wall of China, the Roman Colosseum.
I'm not that surprised by it. There's so many other things that we see when we start learning about and looking into Native culture that I think people on the surface may be surprised, because they tend to think of Indian people as anti-intellectual or, non-scientific, or somehow, living in the backwoods and not knowledgeable about things like that.
The knowledge embedded in these earthworks and encoded in their structure is anything but primitive. It's remarkable.
It also shows that not just high math, but these sites are lined up primarily with the lunar calendar. They had high math, they understood geometry, and because of the lunar calendar, they also understood the heavens, astronomy.
What I've learned.
The unit of measurement was 606, which they call the stade. One side of the Great Pyramid from the base to the tip of the apex is 606 feet. If you square inside the octagon, which the surveyors like to call, it's a term they use, squaring the circle, and you divide that up into 4 equal parts inside of cubes, you'll find those cubes are all made of 606-foot lines per cube side. The angle of the Great Pyramid of Egypt runs 51.8 degrees up the slope from the base to the angle. That measurement is there, and when you come off of the baseline at Newark and you run true north and then measure that angle back to the baseline, what do we find? 51.8 degrees. So did they have the same math as the ancient Egyptians? Well, I gotta say, yeah, it sure looks like it.
Math, the same calculations as ancient Egyptians.
He found something even more amazing.
They found one major earth structure in the center, surrounded by 12 small burials. They pried this box apart, and in it was a black stone. They opened this box, and here was this unusual artifact.
We own the Newark Holy Stones, and these stones were found in a Hopewell mound in the 1860s, and the presumption from finding them was that perhaps the American Indians had some kind of contact with the Hebrews, or possibly they were the Hebrews. Or possibly they were the Hebrews. So we have the museum has been interested in origins.
They took it to some scholars, identified that it was probably some type of Hebrew. They took it to some rabbis living in the area, and upon looking at it, they said yes, they could read it. And it was a complete rendition of the 10 Commandments. They called it block Hebrew because they had never seen anything written like this, but they called it block Hebrew. And so then naysayers started picking on Weyrich. He was accused of sticking this stone in front of these 9 men somehow and being able to hide it and conceal it.
Upon examination,
It wasn't until sometime in the 1900s, lo and behold, in Israel, they find, guess what? They found block-style Hebrew. That block-style Hebrew was given a name by the experts, monumental Hebrew, because of the way it was written. Long after Weyrich. After.
mainstream archaeologists dismiss such findings, in part because scientific protocols and rules of evidence were not followed in their acquisition.
They can't say that about the Bat Creek stone.
Native American wrote this, and Cyrus Gordon turned it upside down. He recognized that it was actually Phoenician.
Phoenician, this older form of Hebrew, dates to the Old Testament Babylonian captivity and the scattering of Israel.
It's Phoenician, ancient Hebrew. So what's going on here? What is that about? Where is that history?
As a scholar of ancient languages, I have discovered that there are many symbols in the Micmac that are very close and similar to those of ancient Egyptian. About 700 BC in Egypt, there was a language that was developed or came in that was called Meroitic from the kingdom of Meroe, which many Egyptian scholars have even called Reformed Egyptian because it's so different than what the standard Egyptian that we know. And this Meroitic is very close to some of the signs of the Micmac.
Anthropologists just miss a lot of the stone evidence and inscriptions in these ancient languages like Egyptian and Greek and Hebrew by saying, well, they were not found in the course of an official excavation.
Nigga, please!
They can't say that about the Bat Creek stone because the Bat Creek stone was found in the course of an official excavation by the Smithsonian Institution.
That this Asian form of haplogroup X is what eventually made its way into the Americas. There have been some recent studies that have suggested that this particular distribution of haplogroup X in the Americas is most consistent with a migration from Asia through the Bering Strait over the land bridge and then down through the ice-free corridor. And so if individuals with haplogroup X migrated through that ice-free corridor, they would have first entered the continental United States and continental North America in the upper Great Plains, and it would make sense then that we would see the highest frequency of haplogroup X today in populations in that region.
Most mainstream archaeologists and historians would probably agree that this assessment is something of a contemporary final word on Native American origins. So does DNA science put much of diffusionist theory to rest? Diffusionists would answer no. The reason? There's a lot about DNA evidence that is a controversy.
There's no controversy among DNA experts about the Middle Eastern origin of haplogroup X. The only question really is, when did it arrive in the Americas? What we find in the journals is that it is commonly thought among DNA experts that there was an outmigration of haplogroup X from the Middle East about 40,000 years ago. But what most people don't realize is that among these same experts in these same journals, there is controversy about the dating. Assume a theory that man branched from chimps 5 to 6 million years ago versus those who are using newer actual findings from DNA pedigree studies. The theoretical dating gives much longer time frames, but the actual data shows a 20-fold reduction and would place the Middle Eastern outmigration of haplogroup X about 2,000 years ago, plus or minus.
They